I think it's time for me to get caught up on what's going on with Iran.
Larry, it's a pleasure to have you as always. Thank you for making the time this weekend. Yesterday was a crazy day. We had the Oreshnik launched at Ukraine. We had the shooting at the White House. But all eyes are on Iran.
It was a crazy day, but most important is this Iran deal that was announced and very different reports on what's in it. So do you know more?
The day started very positively. Last night was also very positive. And it looked like Trump was posting about a deal. We're getting reports from mainly Western media, Israeli media, less so from Iranian media, but also indications from Iran that a deal is near. So everything was looking good. And then, Trump was even yesterday saying that would be signed by today, few small details, right. Just very bizarre. And then today, obviously, things started going in the opposite direction. We had Tasnim said a few hours ago, the MOU between Iran and, when I say deal, as you know, I mean MOU. So we're getting a one-pager. Iran.
It's a one-page deal to then take 60 days to negotiate a real deal. That's what's on the table.
Tasnim says the MOU between Iran and America may be cancelled. And it seems the two main sticking points, initially they were reported to be the unfreezing of assets and the war in Lebanon. Now, that was a few hours ago. Since then, I've heard more about the unfreezing of assets and less about the war in Lebanon, which makes sense to me because that one seems harder to solve. An informed source told Tasnim that Iran holds no optimism.
No, Lebanon is easy. Just tell the IDF to get out of Lebanon. Problem solved.
Conducting all exchange through the media, that's not the issue. Okay, so Tasnim News put out another report saying the claims of American officials that Iran would not receive any sanctions relief until it begins transferring its enriched uranium are false. The unfreezing of assets is one of the red lines from the beginning of the deal. So we see a pretty...
And to make this harder for Trump, he criticized Obama for unfreezing Iranian assets as part of Obama's nuclear deal. And so if he does the exact same thing, he opens himself up to all kinds of attacks politically. Trump.
Tricky predicament we're in right now. We haven't spoken for a few days. What do you make of these developments?
Well, let's first understand, you know why, which assets were frozen, why those were frozen in the first place?
Iranian.
No, I don't. I'm actually interested.
Assets.
Where did those Iranian assets come from? Was it just in a bank account the Iranians had sitting around doing nothing? Or was it the fact that Iran prepaid the United States while the Shah was still in power for a number of weapon systems, F-4s, F-16s? So they paid for weapons that were never delivered. But so it's just like, you prepaying for a Lamborghini and I never deliver it to you.
You hear it today, like all these places have prepaid for U.S. weapons, and the United States is saying it can't deliver them for a while. Like Taiwan, just finding out they won't be getting, the missiles it had, Patriot, the Tomahawk missiles it had paid for because the United States needs them. It's a great system for the United States. You get others to prepay for weapons, and then you maybe deliver them, maybe don't, depending on how you feel like.
And then the money that you prepaid, I keep. Would you be okay with that?
Yes.
No. So that's why that's one of the main sources of assets. The other source of the assets was oil money. So Iran, when it was still even under the Ayatollah, was still participating in the petrodollar system. So those assets too were frozen.
Petrodollar system is countries in the Middle East sell oil. The people who buy the oil pay their dollars to the United States, and then the United States, if it feels like, it gives the dollars to the countries like Iran. Or that's the situation Iraq is in right now. And when the Shah got overthrown, the United States said, okay, all this oil money, that we're keeping it.
Frozen. So Iran's been through a number of the promises going back to JCPOA that, they asked, we'll trust us, we'll get those unfrozen. Never did. So that's why it's a red line. The United States is going to have to unfreeze assets, not eventually, not waiting to see how Iran complies up front. Now, there have been some reports that Iran would be willing to take half up front and then on the condition.
And you have to remember, the unfreezing of assets, that's going to create problems for the United States. It's not just an issue of whether Iran gets money. If they unfreeze $20 billion of assets, what are those $20 billion? Where are they right now? U.S. Treasuries. And if Iran wants to use them right away, what does Iran do? It sells them. It sells $20 billion of treasuries. And this is at a time where the United States is running record deficits and need to sell a huge quantity of treasuries every month, and 20 billion extra treasuries sold. Well, that pushes down the value of treasuries. It makes it so the United States needs to pay more to borrow. It's not just, it's unfreezing this asset will hurt the United States. Not a huge amount, but it will. And that's why the United States doesn't want to do it.
I think that'd be crazy, but, I'm not on the Iranian negotiating team. The other one is the lifting of sanctions, not some point down the road. Again, Iran's been, they've been there, done that. They got the T-shirt. JCPOA, they signed on. They complied. It was only when Trump tore up the JCPOA agreement that Iran said, okay, we're going to start enriching uranium and just to try to get you back to the table. That didn't work. But never were the sanctions. In fact, the sanctions were toughened. So that's, again, another red line.
And it's something Trump did. And that's, he put himself in this position. He bombed Iran 2 times during negotiations. He, on behalf of America, betrayed Iran as Obama set up this nuclear deal as U.S. president on behalf of America. And Trump didn't honor that. He betrayed Iran. So he's betrayed Iran 3 times, hugely, and he's bombed their supreme leader. So, yeah, no, they're demanding stuff up front, and it makes sense.
Those 2 things have to happen, or there's not going to be a deal, period. The third is the fighting's got to stop in Lebanon and in Israel. The Israelis have to pull back. I don't think Israel will do that. And I don't see Iran walking around and say, "Oh, never mind, that's too difficult." No, that's at the center of this entire conflict, going back 46 years. Then the last issue is the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran's willing to, they've already opened it for those countries that are willing to abide by the PGSA, the Persian Gulf Strait Authority that Iran has put in place. Got to learn a new
acronym.
Yeah, if you're not learning a new acronym
Yeah, there have been some ships this month that have gone out that were stuck in there for a long time. But from my understanding, apart from Iranian ships and maybe Chinese ships and a few others, much fewer new ships have gone into the Gulf. Ships are afraid of getting stuck in there. So the traffic into the Gulf is nowhere near normal.
Every show, dude, you're not doing your job. So we learn a new acronym. And, again, Iran's not going to back off of that. As far as the store of enriched uranium, there is a possibility that they might allow Pakistan to take possession of it. That's a possibility. But remember, the central country in all of this, behind the scenes, is Pakistan. And what happened to Pakistan in the last 24 hours? The Baluchis bombed a train and killed 100 people. Guess who has a historical intelligence relationship with the Baluchis? Give you one guess.
Israel?
Begins with an I.
Yeah.
Israel. Israel has been providing funding. In fact, there was a big scandal several years ago with the Jandalans, I guess it is, where
Israel message to Pakistan: you broker a peace deal and end our war against Iran that we wanted for decades. Will terrorize the hell out of your country.
Mossad agents went out and presented themselves as U.S. intelligence officers, providing paid sources in the Baluchis, and claimed that they were acting on behalf of the United States, when in fact it was Israeli agents, but they were getting the Baluchis to carry out terrorist attacks inside Iran. So this is an old habit. So I'm willing to bet you that this terrorist attack was set up as a message to the Pakistanis to back the hell off. That it was Israel back that up.
That is Israel trying to torpedo the peace.
Saw the explosion.
Killed 100 people.
Yeah, I dismissed it not in an inhumane way. I dismissed it as an accident. I thought it was an accident. That was my
no,
I didn't even read the. I just saw the headline.
An explosion that kills 100 people. That's not an accident.
That's it.
This was a bombing. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate terrorist attack carried out by a terrorist group. See, I had their name here before, what they're claiming. Let's see. The Baluchistan Liberation Army. Now, they've been, seeking independence from Pakistan's central government for years. But so they say that this attack killed at least 24 people. I heard 100. And the train was carrying soldiers. But see, the other thing that's going on behind here is Pakistan is the one who is heading up at the direction of China the negotiations between the United States and Iran, and also with the Saudis. If Pakistan is uniquely positioned, it, for example, could give the Saudis, as part of their security agreement, a nuclear umbrella. Because Pakistan can say, anybody attacks you, we got your back, we got nukes. So Pakistan, I believe, is they're what I'm hearing is they're fairly optimistic that they might get at least they've got all the ingredients for an agreement there. The problem is Washington and Israel. And as soon as the word started leaking out that there was the possibility of an agreement, then what happened? Oh boy, Ted Cruz went on the offensive. Lindsey Graham went on the offensive.
Yeah, that's why I had been saying there's three ways to end a war at the beginning. Trump tacos out, basically surrenders to Iran. Trump escalates, the entire Middle East goes up in flames, and everyone loses. Or this current stalemate goes on for another 2-3 months, and the rest of the world pressures Trump into surrendering to Iran. I was beginning to think that Trump surrendering to Iran was impossible, just because of Trump's own rhetoric and just because of the powerful forces that have influence over him that would be against that. Israel, neocons. So I don't think he can capitulate sufficiently to get a deal with Iran without being killed politically at home. And it might be that the dynamic that's coming into play.
Miriam Adelson's making calls. Bibi Netanyahu's got his hair on fire. So the pressure is real and significant. And then in the aftermath of that, then the United States starts changing its.
And you have to understand another pressure point has been Gold. He's supporting the Iran war because he's believing everything Trump is spewing out about how we're winning and everything like that. If Trump basically surrenders to Iran, how would Asmongold react? And how would Asmongold's viewers react? What would happen to Trump's already terrible pollings if the few people that still believe what he's saying find out we've lost the Iran war? You're going to have historically, unprecedentedly bad poll numbers for Trump.
So what's saying in public or quote, toughening its demands. Iran's not going to cave in on those demands. This is not like negotiating over the price of a car where, each side is going to have to make some concessions. Iran is not going to make concessions with respect to frozen assets.
By the way, the best decision for Trump would be to capitulate immediately because he's going to be forced to eventually anyway by the rest of the world. I mean, once the real economic pain hits this summer over June, July, and August, by the end of that, the rest of the world will be uniting to pressure Trump into giving in. And that's when I think a deal finally happens. So if that's going to be the end point anyway, might as well do it now before 3 more months of economic pain. It'll make things gas prices a little lower going into the midterms. And damage to Republicans will be a little bit less. So it's the best decision, but I don't know if he can.
And sanctions. And its control of the Strait of Hormuz.
So then the big question is, so I've been seeing, you said you've seen my interview with the other gentleman earlier. So you would have heard me say, I think the two sticking points that I think both sides need to concede on, the unfreezing of the assets, which you've made a very important point, is that there's a lot of pressure on Trump not to take the deal. And that's why I said that if Trump managed to make a deal, that's going to be bad for the US either way. It's just a matter of how bad. But if he does sign a deal,
yes, exactly.
Despite all that pressure, I would give him credit. Not for the war, obviously, it's a stupid war, but just for being able to make a deal with all the pressure around him to try to sabotage it.
Sure.
He deserves credit for that, but yeah, it's the least bad option out of the horrible situation he put himself in.
Concession on the American side for the unfreezing of assets, and there's a concession on the Iranian side for not charging a fee at the Strait of Hormuz, which the Americans are saying the deal does not include Iran charging.
Iran's not going to do that. Iran's
exactly. That's what I think. Yeah.
Charge a fee. They want a fee to cover all the damage that has been done by the first Israeli-U.S. bombing or the second combined U.S.-Israeli bombing of Iran, not to mention the first attack that took place a year ago in June. So again, Iran's not backing off of that. Now,
agreed. That's why reports in Israeli media on Channel 14 that no toll on Strait of Hormuz, I didn't believe it.
They could come out and say, okay, we're going to unfreeze all your assets, and that'll give you to quote the reparations. But still, Iran said, wait, we're paying out of our own pocket. We didn't do this to us. You did this to us. And in the same way, we've seen how the Russians took very, very seriously the Ukrainian attack that killed those 21 schoolgirls, largely schoolgirls, a few male students, but mostly girls. And man, they pounded Kyiv yesterday significantly. And Iran has not forgotten the 168 Manab girls. I mean, that's, they're not going to just let that go. They haven't forgotten that. And so, the United States has never felt that pain. Iran has. So I just see Iran as, Iran's taking a very principled stand. There are so many lies that are consistently told, and we've talked about these before.
Yeah, media exists to lie in the West to spin whatever narrative the powers that be want.
And I just did a search. Yeah, I used two different engines, Grok and Claude, Anthropic. Both came up with the same answers. Give me the top 10 terrorist groups since 2000, both in terms of attacks and fatalities and casualties. 80% of them are Sunni extremist groups that have ties to the Saudis and to the Gulf Arabs, hands down. Hamas shows up simply because they're counting October 7th, 2023 as a terrorist.
But Hamas, that was funded by Qatar and Netanyahu, not Iran.
Attack. I maintain that was not a terrorist attack. That was a raid, a military raid. It was targeted principally at military personnel and militias. Yes, there were civilians, and that qualifies as a terrorism. But in terms of, did Hamas kill the vast majority of the civilians? I don't know, because you got to look at what Israel did, and with its Apache helicopters blowing cars up willy-nilly that were fleeing that rave. And there's significant evidence implicating Israel in the deaths of many of those civilians. So it's just not a simple black and white. Oh, Hamas is terrible. I watched a monk debate last Wednesday that featured Mike Pompeo and Victoria Nuland on one side, John Mearsheimer. And
my opinion of Hamas is that Netanyahu was handed them $1.3 billion in cash between 2012 and 2022. Qatar provided the money, but the money goes to the IDF, and then those suitcases full of cash are delivered by IDF soldiers to Hamas. That is how it funded itself during that decade. And at the end of that, Hamas gave Netanyahu a present. They wanted more than anything, an excuse to level Gaza into the ground. So Netanyahu funds a terrorist organization that then gives him what he wants. And yeah, I see Hamas as a tool to fuck over the Palestinian people. So I'm not a huge Hamas supporter. I'm even less a Netanyahu supporter.
Stephen Walt on the other side. And they were debating it was basically going back to John Adams' speech about we do not go out to seek monsters to destroy. And the entire premise of that question is false in the sense that monsters are imaginary creations, like Frankenstein, a monster, Dracula, a monster, but they're imaginary. And
there are real monsters too. They're people of flesh and blood, Stalin, Hitler, those type of people, monsters. We have some of monsters like that alive today too.
In the course of that, Mike Pompeo made the claim that Hezbollah had killed thousands of Israelis. So I looked it up. Since 1982, when Hezbollah came into existence, Hezbollah has been responsible for the death of 872 Israelis. Think about that. 800 over 44 years. And you can look it up yourself. 44 years, 872 Israelis. How many Palestinians have the Israelis killed? Close. They go conservatively with the 92,000, and that includes the 73,000 that the Israeli Defense Forces admitted to. But that number is probably much greater. But what you're looking
undoubtedly, there are most likely Palestinians buried under the rubble that will be discovered for years to come.
At is for every dead Israeli over the course of the last 42 years, you've had 100 dead Palestinians. You tell me who the monster is.
The monster is the one who funded ISIS, who genocided Christians in Syria. 1 million Christians, poof, vanished from Syria. Maybe half of them fled to Europe, but the other half.
So I want to read out a quick report that came while you're speaking before I go back to my questions. So I haven't read it yet. According to a report from CNN, and we've been seeing these all day. So it's like really difficult to understand which ones are intentional leaks as part of the information warfare versus genuine leaks. Tasnim did report something interesting earlier today. They said Iranian officials got got told by American officials not to listen to what Trump says on Truth Social because that's all for the media and for the people in the US. So more part of a narrative and not actually part of a deal.
Yes, Trump didn't used to do this. He didn't used to lie this way. I think that this year, and especially with the Iran war, he's reached a new level of just spouting bullshit on social media. It's gone to the point where they have to tell the Iranians to ignore what he tweets. It's insane. Why? I think that's a cigar, but maybe it's herbs. I don't know. Maybe he's addicted to caffeine, to nicotine.
So they told him to just ignore what Trump posts about, according to Tasnim News. So the report that just came in now from CNN, a senior Trump administration official claimed that the deal would commit Iran to giving up its highly enriched uranium, which, according to most sources, the MOU has nothing to do. Commit. Okay, that could be a commitment, which Trump refers to as nuclear dust, with the official summarizing the approach as no dust, no dollars, adding that this is the trust but verify on steroids. An Iranian source told CNN that the strait is already open, but that the coordination with Iranian authorities is required to ensure safe transit, while also stressing that the most important thing for us is that the war...
We should ban the president from social media. It's unprofessional. Well, it depends how social media is used. I mean, you look at presidents of countries around the world, they have social media accounts and they use it and there's no problem. You know, don't ban presidents from using social media because the actions of one president in one country. The bigger problem is that Trump is lying to his supporters. And he would still be lying without social media. He'd just be lying on live TV. And yeah, you really also shouldn't be deplatforming a current sitting president.
Must end for good in the whole Middle East. They're really quadrupling down on Lebanon. They're not budging an inch on Lebanon. Trump separately told Netanyahu he supports Israel's right to maintain freedom of action against threats on all fronts, including Lebanon, according to an Israeli official. So that says it all. 3 different sources, 3 different stories in that one report. The US is saying...
Why even one? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One of them is what's happened in Gaza and the fact that Biden let all the killing go on in Gaza for, 3 years? And Kamala was vice president during that, and the left, and the people on the left, they weren't happy with that. And that's one reason he got president. It's not just who Trump is, there's who's the other side. Kamala Harris was the border czar when there was unprecedented migration into the country, when most Americans didn't want unlimited illegal migration into the country. It's unfortunately... Honestly, there should never have been a president like Trump if we had a functioning democracy, in that you'd have two good choices for the people. But people like Ron Paul, alternative candidates that aren't pro-Israel and don't tie the establishment line, are taken out by the media. That's how it's been my entire life. Trump was the first outsider that managed to get on the ticket for president, and that was enough for him to win.
We're not going to unfreeze anything until you get the uranium. Iran is saying we control the Strait of Hormuz and the war needs to end everywhere. And another Israeli source is saying, Trump says, Israel could keep fighting in Lebanon. It is so difficult to reach a deal. It's like all sides are pulling in all these different directions. You start to wonder how much decision-making powers the president really has.
By the way, if you think the Iran war is bad and hating Trump for it, Biden administration is one that couldn't say no to Netanyahu even once during 3 years of people getting killed in Gaza. And Kamala Harris was part of that, and she didn't say no either. So believing that they would have said no when Netanyahu said bomb Iran, I think that we would have had this Iran war with Kamala Harris too. And that's the problem with the United States, is the power of Jewish lobby and their control over politics, is that it doesn't matter who you vote for. The outcome is what Israel wants.
As any American president really has. When all these, like when I decide something in business, everyone can give me an opinion and I make a decision and everyone goes with it. That's how businesses operate. Now we expect the same thing here. Everyone gives their opinion to Trump, whether it's Netanyahu, his senators, the list goes on. They all give an opinion to Trump, and then Trump makes a decision. Everyone goes with that decision. Now I understand Israel has agency, but Trump could easily strong-arm Netanyahu. Trump is more popular than Netanyahu in Israel. So if push comes to shove, Netanyahu needs Trump more than Trump needs Netanyahu. That's my way of looking at it.
Trump is popular in Netanyahu because he's seen as extremely pro-Israel. If he tries to pressure Netanyahu on something that's against Israel's interest, his approval rating in Israel will go down. Maybe it won't collapse, but it will definitely go down. And there's still the neocons, and there's still all those politicians in Congress that are beholden to AIPAC money. It's not going to be easy for Trump to capitulate and come to a deal with Iran.
So I don't get why Trump just doesn't crack the whip and just make a deal or just walk away and stop this charade. I don't think he can walk away anymore. I don't think he can walk away because he keeps threatening he will strike if there's no deal. So he's in the corner.
I could start by giving you 250 million reasons.
He keeps threatening to strike because he knows that if he does nothing, oil prices keep going up and gas prices keep going up, and he's finished in the midterms. So he's threatening to strike because he desperately wants a deal. But what Iran's offering is something that I don't think he can accept politically. At least not yet. He needs the rest of the world to come together and pressure him to do that. And the rest of the world hasn't experienced enough pain to be panicked enough to pressure Trump.
The amount of money that Miriam Adelson gave to Donald Trump. Then you've got the political pressure, the likes of Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz. In fact, a significant number of his Republican donor base would be just furious if he makes any concessions to Iran. And again,
it's not just a donor base. It's the average person like Asmongold that think we won in Iran. And remember Asmongold, how happy he was when we bombed the Iran supreme leader. He thought what a wonderful thing it was. And the outcome is basically Trump capitulating to Iran. How is Asmongold going to feel? He's going to feel like, what the fuck did we do? Why the fuck did we do this? Yeah, it'll turn the average Joe that still supports Trump against him. And Trump is already record low polling numbers.
It's all predicated on the lie spread that, Iran is this fanatical regime. You're responding to a leading terrorist threat in the world, which it's not. It's absolutely not. The facts, particularly over the last 26 years. In fact,
again, the genocide of Christians in Syria, the worst thing that's happened in the Middle East in the last 20 years, that was CIA and Mossad. It was the West wanting Assad in Syria gone, and so they funded radical Islamists, ISIS, and ISIS genocided Christians. Nothing to do with Iran. So attacking Iran isn't going to prevent Mossad from funding the genocides of Christians somewhere else in the Middle East. So
the only one that has been helping sponsor radical Islamic terrorism is the United States itself. And
Mossad.
When the Israelis want to complain about Hamas and, look at what Hamas has done to us. You guys funded them. You
Good of him for finally mentioning this. So few people actually mentioned it, that Israel is the one who funded Hamas.
You funded Hamas for the very purpose of trying to blow up and destroy a peace process. So nobody, neither Washington nor Tel Aviv accept any responsibility whatsoever for all the death and mayhem that they've caused. So, what has happened, I guess, behind the scenes, what Pakistan is working on is it's solidifying its relationship with the Saudis. The Saudis now have, before the Saudis felt they didn't have any protection, they had to rely upon the United States. They now no longer have to do that. But in the course of that, Pakistan's also brokering a permanent security arrangement between Iran and Saudi Arabia so that the Saudis don't have to fear.
Yes, for anyone who doesn't know, Netanyahu sent Mossad head general to Qatar, begged it to pay Hamas. 2020, 2 years before October 7th. That's the type of situation you had. When Netanyahu's been begging Qatar to pay Hamas, then Netanyahu and Qatar are the one who's funding terrorism.
Iran has never been in the business of exporting his Islamic revolution. It's true. It has absolutely provided support to Hezbollah and to Hamas over the years, but Iranian support's not the critical ingredient in that.
Apparently, the majority of Iran's support for Hamas ended in 2012 when Qatar started paying them.
I venture to say I think Israel provided more money, billions of dollars, to Hamas than Iran did.
Especially in the last 10 years, the 1.3 billion.
Starters. But, this ultimately getting the Palestinian people a homeland. and self-determination. You know, that's not subversive. That's humanitarian. And Israel in the process is, and I think Brendan Weichert made this point with you earlier, pointing out that Israel has been its own worst enemy diplomatically. It's managed to alienate most of the Middle East, and now at least
Honestly, Asmongold, Nuxtaku, I think they honestly believe that Iran is a sponsor of Hamas and was behind October 7th. Netanyahu delivers $1.3 billion of cash to Hamas, and people think that Iran had something to do with October 7th. It's insane.
Turkey and Egypt, they are more open listening to the kind of diplomatic solution that Pakistan is proposing. And again, Pakistan is proposing it with the full weight of the Chinese and the Russians behind them. So this is...
I don't think Nuxtaku and Asmongold paid for it. I think they're just uninformed. They only started covering politics like post-COVID, a year or two after COVID. And after, in Nux cases, really, after October 7th. And so it's amazing, but I don't think Nuxtaku even knows that Netanyahu handed Hamas $1.3 billion. There was one video, one of his series criticizing Hamas, where he was asked, does he have any problems with Netanyahu? And he said, well, I think he could have done more to prevent October 7th, is one criticism of Netanyahu. I would have thought, given his opinion of Hamas, that Netanyahu handing Hamas $1.3 billion would be something he would criticize Netanyahu for. So I think he honestly doesn't know.
Russia and China were dead serious about trying to create a new security architecture in the Persian Gulf, one that's not dependent upon U.S. flexing military muscle there. Now, if Saudis and Qataris hold firm, the United States will, if it tries to restart military attacks on Iran, it's going to face some real obstacles.
Iran made a threat. Dropsite News reported on this. Iran said it will consider any attack on its territory a resumption of the Third Gulf War and would target Israel and the GCC countries, any attack on its territory. So that kind of crosses out the idea, because there was a theory coming out that the US may ask Israel to strike Iran and the US may not strike Iran. So Iran, when it retaliates, only focuses on Israel, not strike the Gulf. But Iran's making it clear any strike will drag everyone into it.
Yes, of course, Trump would want that, because if he can, then he can have Israel destroy Iran's oil infrastructure without Iran, his idea, Iran destroying oil infrastructure of the Gulf states. But that's not it. No way Iran would go over that. If Israel strikes Iran's oil, then Iran strikes oil across the Gulf, period.
A source close to the IRGC said Iran's retaliation would result in the oil and gas infrastructure of the GCC countries coming under attack and the Houthis closing the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, blocking the Red Sea. So Iran is drawing a very big red line against any military action.
Well, understand that Israel cannot attack Iran without U.S. support. It needs the air refueling capabilities at a minimum to launch any kind of significant attack with the U.S. supplied F-35 jets. They have to be refueled before they could even get within firing range of Iran. And assuming that they launch something like Tomahawks or JASSMs, because they're not going to fly over Iranian territory and get shot down. They're going to do a standoff again. They need to be refueled.
So just to have a look at what that looks like on the map. Israel is here. Iran is all the way over here, and Israel's fighter jets that are going to bomb Iran, they can't make this round trip, like to the edge of Iran and fire off their long-range missiles and come back without refueling jets, refueling them mid-flight, because it's outside of their range, and U.S. refueling planes. And so the United States needs to be involved in any effort to bomb Iran.
Fueled at least 2 times inbound. And they're going to need to be refueled at least 2 times trying to get back to home base. So that air refueling capability is huge, and that can't be underestimated.
Didn't they get refueling tankers that are being delivered now? I think I read it somewhere that they're finally getting refueling tankers, and some Gulf countries are not happy about it. Not operational yet, so probably still need the Americans now. Because there's talks about how they were able to strike Qatar, because they shouldn't have the capacity to strike Qatar unless they use a refueling tanker or they alter the fighter jet. Legally, they can't make any alterations to the fighter jet. No country has. I've heard, you might know more than this than I do, but I've heard that the Israelis are the only ones that altered their fighter jets, despite the Americans barring any clients of those fighter jets to make any alterations.
Well, they could attach additional fuel tanks, but that's usually for ferrying those jets from one point to another. That's not carrying a combat load. So when they're carrying a combat load, their effective distance is about 550 miles, nautical miles. And just look at the map from pick your spot in Israel to get to say Qatar. I think that's about 800 miles. So right off the bat, they're going to need refueling, and then even when they get to Qatar, they need to be refueled again, because even if they launch, let's say they just launch from the Persian Gulf side of Qatar towards Iran, if they use the JASSM, those have a range of about 500 miles. Again, Iran is a massive country, so I don't care how many jets. Israel does not have the size of an air force of such a size as to blanket Iran. They don't. And as soon as if bombs start falling on Iran, the Iranians aren't going to waste a minute. They're locked and loaded, and so they will pull the trigger, and then the war will be back on in full in full horror. So
and wow, will oil prices go up?
This is again, Iran has played this very cool. They're willing to talk, they're willing to negotiate, but they're not willing to surrender.
Yeah, Brendan Weikart, you mentioned in the interview, he said something interesting. He said, Mario, I wrote a whole book in the book. I make assumptions that Iran are just a bunch of fanatics, that if they get their hands on a nuclear weapon, they'll cause significant harm. And he's like, Mario, one thing
everything we've seen in this war so far is that Iran has been very deliberate. If the United States struck a desalination plant, it then returns and strikes the desalination plants. It never was the first one to bomb any critical infrastructure. Its entire strategy has been an eye for an eye. Someone that's that restrained about attacking and to only do retaliation strikes. So why would they use a nuke differently?
I learned from this was they're a lot more pragmatic than I thought. Not sure if you remember, you heard that segment, which was interesting to see how his perspective of Iran has changed over the years. And it seems a lot of people have seen a different side of Iran in this war. Again, there's a lot of criticism that could be targeted at various things that they've done in terms of strategies. But as a whole, from a military perspective, it was a pragmatic escalation ladder, a tit-for-tat response.
An eye for an eye.
And the whole negotiations process, they have their stance, and they've been pretty consistent with it throughout. If anything, I'm trying to be balanced here, but if anything, on Trump's side, he's the one that's making those outlandish claims about wiping out civilization, talking about a big blow. This rhetoric is not coming out of Iran. And that's coming from someone, as you know me, I'm very critical of the Iranian government. But still, that their behavior so far, I think what they're asking for, why wouldn't they ask for this? They've gone through decades of sanctions. Now, what do you think? Do you think the Iranians would accept? So I think they would. If the US agrees to unfreeze a bunch of assets right now, without any preconditions, do you think Iran would not charge a fee for the Strait of Hormuz? Because they could do it later. They could say, all right, we're not going to charge one. They can change their mind in 6 months. But that seems like
if they stop charging a toll, it will be very politically difficult for them to start charging a toll again. So I don't think they'd be open to that. Also, unfreezing of assets. Iran needs to use those assets, needs to sell and get those assets into somewhere concrete, which isn't instantaneous. And until it happens, the United States can just freeze those assets again at any time.
A possible middle ground for both sides to be able to meet and get some sort of MOU signed. Just the two concessions. We stop the war everywhere. I think there should be none. That should be such an easy one to achieve, in my view. A lot of people say that's going to be impossible. Karen, I spoke to Karen. She's like,
must be reposted that guy we watched earlier. Maybe he is aware. I just hope he is on the right side of history against digital ID. Yeah.
There's no way Trump can stop Netanyahu in Lebanon. But the one I think they can both agree on is the unfreezing of assets and the Iran not charging a toll.
Yeah, I don't see Iran backing off on charging the toll at all.
It's going to be hard.
In the same way, they charge. People say, well, the Suez Canal, that's man-made, so they can charge on that. Panama Canal, man-made, they can charge on that. Well, this is still Iranian territorial waters, at least 12 miles out.
There's straits in Turkey, the Bosphorus and the other one, the Dardanelles.
The Dardanelles.
The Danish straits. They're not charges a fee.
So they could all charge, and it's just like it's a rite of passage in use. Now, we saw Admiral Caudle the other day. His last name Caudle, and he admitted, we militarily can't send ships in that'll blast open the Strait of Hormuz. And we've talked about this before, because the multi-layered defense system that Iran has in place extends well into the interior of Iran. It leaves them in a place where they can fire short-range ballistic missiles and drones at any ship that dares to go through without permission. And so all of this gets back to the question of insurance. No insurance company is going to insure a ship unless they've got 100% guarantee that there's not going to be some drone fired at them.
Yep.
Because then all of a sudden that insurance company's on the hook. It's too risky. And these guys are risk averse. So, and Iran said, hey, we've got a reasonable solution. Pay a fee, you pass. We're not the ones shooting at you.
Then why does Trump even need a deal? Because if the Iranians are not going to concede on the
Well, because Trump put in his own blockade, and because of that, Iran is restricting traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, and it's not going to let huge amount of traffic through as long as the U.S. is still blockading and attacking Iranian ships. So he needs to one-sidedly lift his blockade to get Iran to really let ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Because right now they're limiting the amount of ships that can move through, and that would be humiliating for Trump.
via the Strait of Hormuz. They're not going to concede on the enriched uranium now. They want to discuss it later. So why does Trump even need to unfreeze assets? Because if Trump just walks away, the Iranians are not going to attack first. So then, how's the deal even on the table? Why is Trump talking about a deal? There must be some concession from Iran. Otherwise, Trump just walks away.
It's loss of face.
Yeah, not knowing that, there is his blockade of the Straits of Hormuz, the American blockade. If he keeps on attacking Iranian ships, that is still provocation, an act of war that could get him drawn back in. So walking away would involve lifting his blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, and that would be basically a mission of defeat. The rest of the world would see it that way. And so he can't just walk away.
You know, it's that Chinese thing, even though they're not Chinese, but, you know, as Trump has repeatedly said, he's obliterated, completely defeated, destroyed. The Iranian Air Force, Iranian Navy, Iranian military, Iranian missiles, it's all destroyed. We've won. And and you make the logical question, well, if that's the case, just declare victory and go home. But that's not the case, because Iran is still intact. Their ballistic missile capabilities.
Well, this was interesting so far, and I agree with the title of this, that Trump's new Iran deal likely to fail. We'll have to wait and see. But Trump is in a terrible spot. Everything he's doing is going to hurt him politically, and doing nothing is slow political pain as gas prices inch up. He's fucked. And he did it to himself by bombing this Iran supreme leader. I'll just skip ahead and see if there's anything else.
All right, guys, I'll give you a quick news recap, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. Just going to give you an update so you're in the loop of all the latest developments, because there's been a lot. I've given the recap briefly in the last few interviews, in the last 7 interviews, and this one's the 8th. But I'll kind of give you a summary of everything so you're fully...
Mario is definitely keeping himself busy.
Updated. So I woke up in the morning to a continuation of the positive news we had yesterday. So on the American side, let me go on the American side. So Trump posted talking about how Barack Obama's deal was terrible. His deal will be better. His deal will be the exact opposite. He said the blockade will remain in full force and effect until an agreement is reached and certified. But he then starts talking positively about Iran. I saw that as a really good sign. I still do, by the way. Our relationship with Iran is becoming a much more professional and productive one. They must understand, however, they cannot develop or procure a nuclear weapon or bomb. I would like to thank thus far all of the countries in the Middle East for their support, blah, blah, blah. But he's talking about Iran in a diplomatic way. He even mentioned at the end, so he said, who knows, maybe Iran joins the Abraham Accords. So, it's a massive shift of tonality where he's no longer disrespecting them, making threats. So that was a really positive development. Then we had Axios revealing the details of the deal. They say the deal has a ceasefire, 60-day ceasefire extension. The Strait of Hormuz is reopened with no tolls. And then the US would lift its blockade and issue sanctions waivers, just letting Iran sell oil freely. That's the only waiver that they talked about. No unfreezing of assets. The unfreezing of assets only happens after certain conditions are met. We don't know what these conditions are met and verifiably implemented. Iran commits in the MOU to never pursue a nuclear weapon, which means nothing because they already have that commitment and had it for years, and to negotiate suspending enrichment and removing its uranium stockpile. So they'll just have to agree. They're like, hey, we won't have a nuclear weapon and we'll negotiate about getting rid of our nuclear stockpile. Such a small, it's not even a concession. The Iranians gave verbal commitments through mediators, telling them how far they'll go. The US forces stay in the region for a full 60 days, withdrawing only after a final deal is reached. The MOU explicitly ends the war in Lebanon. Gulf countries all back the deal. Netanyahu raised concerns about the Lebanon ceasefire on a call with Trump. But according to Axios, he was overridden. But now we're hearing that this is a sticking point for the deal. So that was a report from the New York Times. Sorry, Axios. The New York Times reported that Iran apparently committed to giving up its nuclear stockpiles of enriched uranium. And they folded apparently when the US negotiators threatened to walk away and resume strikes. Find it hard to believe they've made it clear they don't fall for threats. But that's what the report by the New York
the civilian side of Iran, I think, is different than the IRGC side, and I think they have much less of a backbone. So I think they might have agreed to things that the IRGC is not okay with. We'll see.
New York Times claims roughly 970 pounds, blah, blah, blah. Another detail in the New York Times, the MOU explicitly ends the war in Lebanon. And they mentioned about what I just said. So kind of confirming what Axios said. Then you have Rubio making a comment. He says, no international waterway, no international airspace should ever be used or rationalized by any country in the world. That should never be accepted as a new normal. Talking about Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz. So we're hearing great news from the US. A deal is near and Iran's giving up all these concessions. Immediately, Iran, through Reuters first, despite claims, Iran firmly rejects transferring the enriched uranium stockpile abroad. So immediately they're saying no to the apparent condition.
And I think, why would it give up control of Strait of Hormuz and charging tolls? I find that hard to believe. This deal would be great for Trump in terms of, it's probably, I'd expected him to have to concede to more things to get a deal with Iran. So if he can get this from Iran, good for him. At the art of the deal, he got a better deal than he should have.
In the deal, according to the US media. Then the Iranian foreign minister, his spokesperson, so an official says, we have moved closer to finalizing a deal, but there's still issues which include the ceasefire in Lebanon, maritime issues, and the releasing of frozen assets. So they haven't been resolved yet. Then Iran's Fars News dropped something wild. According to them, American officials... Okay, so that's an interesting one. Then the Iranians say, American officials have been privately messaging us, telling us to ignore Trump's posts about a deal because they, quote, primarily focus for promotional purposes and media consumption. So essentially, according to Fars, up to you if you want to believe it, but they're saying American officials told us to ignore Trump. All he's doing now is just an information warfare, just kind of feeding propaganda to his people to make...
Yeah, this is Asmongold. He's tweeting for the likes of Asmongold, nonsense, complete lies, for Asmongold's consumption. And he's telling the Iranians to ignore it because it's not the truth. It's hilarious. Okay, I'll check that out later.
Make it seem like a win. Let him do his thing, which I agree. Let him do his thing. If that means him walking away, perfect. But that says a lot on the posts by Trump and the media, the leaks that are coming through Axios and New York Times. Again, that's assuming you believe that report from Fars News. Then Iran made it clear through Tasnim News that the Strait of Hormuz will not go back to the way it was. It's Iran's sovereign territory, and they control the Strait of Hormuz, and they will be charging a fee on the Strait. So they've made it very clear today that the reports by the New York Times and Axios about Iran not charging a fee are false.
That's good. That's what I expected. Don't give up your leverage if you're Iran. That makes no sense.
And then Iranians then say they haven't agreed on anything to do with their nuclear program. Claims that Iran agreed to a 20-year nuclear suspension with the US are spreading like wildfire. Iran denies them, again, according to Tasnim News. No suspension, no commitment to remove nuclear materials, nothing on the nuclear file at all in the current agreement. So again, that goes completely against, this is why it's concerning, guys. It's that we're getting completely opposing reports from Western
So it's just like yesterday. We're completely opposing reports.
media and Iranian media. And I don't get the point of it. Like one of my producers told me something interesting. I mentioned it in a previous interview. He's like, Mario, I think this is all intentional on the American side because the deal will obviously be a bad deal for the US. But what Trump and the media are doing right now is trying to confuse the average reader as much as possible. So when the deal actually comes out, people are just lost what's true, what's not true, what claims are true. And they just kind of forget about it.
That'll work for a day. And then the details will become clear and people will weigh in. It's not going to work, this strategy.
Lost with all the flood of information. So the information overload is intentional to confuse the average person, the average voter. It's a very interesting point, and that could be true. Then Tasnim News says, Iran and the US are still deadlocked on the final language of their potential agreement. And according to Iran, Washington is the one blocking finalization. The deal is written, 1 or 2 points are left. And then lastly, we got Tasnim News, according to the Iranian president, he said it.
Yeah, I think this is Trump getting a deal with Iran. And then he'll look it over and sees whether he can do it politically or not. And I'm not sure he can do it politically. So I think maybe bombs will fly again. We'll see. Or he might just chicken out and just more status quo. But I don't know if the type of deal that could be worked out with Iran, which would be in Iran's favor, is something he can politically stomach.
Tasnim News that no decision is going to be made without the supreme leaders okay with it as go ahead. Okay, so that's on the Iranian side. We've told the American side, the Iranian side. Now, what is the Israeli media and officials saying? Well, number one, according to Haaretz, according to the source, there it is, Channel 14, Netanyahu has ordered his ministers not to talk to the media about the impending US-Iran deal. Israel likely isn't thrilled. So yeah, Netanyahu told his ministers not to talk about the deal whatsoever. In other words, the way I interpret this, assuming the report is true, that the deal is bad and, just Israel doesn't want any attention to it whatsoever. Or maybe they're trying to sabotage the deal, or maybe they're trying to make changes to the deal. So they're keeping hush-hush about it. I would guess it's because it's a bad deal. And I would assume it's going to be a bad deal. I've been saying this for a long time, guys.
Yeah, it has to be a bad deal. Iran's not going to agree to anything of a deal that Trump is going to be happy with.
As you probably know, is that this is going to be horrible deal for the US, catastrophic deal for Israel long term, because Iran's going to come out much stronger. Then you've got Israeli politician Benny Gantz slams potential US-Iran deals. He starts attacking the deal. He says, quote, "It is absolutely forbidden under any circumstances to accept the ceasefire in Lebanon as part of the deal with Iran." Acquiescing to the ceasefire in Lebanon.
Yeah, Israel has plans to build settlements in Lebanon. Those plans can't be disrupted.
Lebanon as part of the deal with Iran will be a strategic mistake that will pay for years to come. This is exactly the case where Israel needs to say to the US, no. There you go. Netanyahu facing pressure domestically to make sure this does not happen, because that will be catastrophic for him politically. Then you got Haaretz claiming Israeli sources told them the US-Iran deal under discussion would preserve Israel's, quote, freedom of action in Lebanon and other areas. Now, just to be clear, guys, just don't forget when the ceasefire happened, Israel was saying, no, we will not stop attacking Hezbollah. Netanyahu said it himself. The war with Lebanon is not going to be part of the ceasefire. And then what happened afterwards? 2 days later, and I remember I was posting about it. I said, guys, I expect it to happen, because I'm under the belief, and many of you disagree with this, but I really believe at the moment, Trump has significantly more influence over Netanyahu than vice versa. Now, Larry made a good point earlier. He said, Mario, it's not only about Netanyahu, it's about all the donors. That's where it gets more complex. And that's why it's hard for me to have an opinion on that.
And it's not only all the donors, it's also the voters, his supporters. The ones who still say in polls that they support Trump, they think we're winning this Iran war. If he agrees to something that the entire world sees as a loss for the United States, Asmongold would be like, what the fuck? When that happens, and this is horrible outcome for the United States, I'm digging that up, the clip of Asmongold saying he's so happy this Iran war started, and I'm just going to rail on him for how stupid can you be? A war that the United States loses is not a good war to start.
I don't have that much transparency on what's going on that front. Now, we saw the same thing after the last ceasefire, the initial ceasefire with this. Israel saying, no, we're going to keep striking Hezbollah, and then 2 days later they stopped, and they abided by the ceasefire. I expect the same thing to happen here, but I'm far from certain. So that's what has happened so far. And then the bad news starts to come in. So this is where the deal starts to look like it's on the verge of collapsing. So Tasnim News said, as the reports were coming out, said the MOU between Iran and America may be cancelled. Channel 13 reported that Netanyahu is said to have told officials in recent discussions that Israel's ability to influence Trump is very low or very limited, and he believes Trump will move into an interim agreement with Iran. Israel is now mainly trying to influence the content of the agreement, particularly regarding Lebanon, and we're seeing that unfold. The north and the Lebanon, the north, and the removal of enriched uranium from Iranian territory. Netanyahu was holding another meeting of the Restricted Security Cabinet tonight, following discussions held over the past 24 hours. What else does he say? Oh, that's interesting. Israeli officials also say Trump's decision to pursue an agreement instead of a military campaign was heavily influenced at the last moment by close advisors, particularly Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. So Kushner and Witkoff, according to many reports, I've seen this a few times, but this one's according to Israeli Channel 13, but I've seen it before as well. They played a role in reaching this deal. And there was a report yesterday. If you remember, guys, I talked about it yesterday. There was a report in one of the Western media outlets that there was a disagreement in the White House on what to do next. Rubio and Hegseth wanted pressure and military action, and Jared Kushner...
Okay. Big strike against Rubio. Yeah. Now, I'm not on the Rubio camp. Asmongold, I think he's a huge fan of Rubio, but fuck Rubio for wanting more war.
Kushner and Witkoff wanted a deal. So a lot of people thought Jared Kushner and Witkoff are the hawks in these negotiations. Multiple reports showing them in this particular case to be ones that are seeking an end to the war.
I am surprised by that. I wonder what the hell happened behind the scenes to make that happen.
Netanyahu's aide Ron Dermer has meanwhile returned to lead talks with the Americans in recent days and participate in the latest discussions. Whenever one of these guys goes to the US, it's not a good sign. US officials are optimistic that a deal with Iran will be signed within days, but they also acknowledge it has not been finalized and could still fall apart, according to Axios. Quote, "We are in a very good place, but there are ways in which the deal can be undermined." So it's already being downplayed heavily. From a deal imminent yet last night to a deal's going to happen today to now we're in a good place, but it will take a few days. There's points still to discuss. And Trump posted saying the same thing. That will take a few days, and I've told my team to take their time. So many conflicting messages. It's wild to watch this unfold.
Yeah, it's just like yesterday, the conflicting messages. Either the deal is entirely in U.S. favor or entirely in Iran's favor. And that appears to still be the case.
Channel 12, points of contention are two things. Israel's demands for freedom of military action in Lebanon, and Iran demanding that its assets are unfrozen right now. So these are the two sticking points that are happening right now, according to Channel 12. Then we have Al Jazeera.
And unfreezing those assets will be very costly to Trump politically, because he attacked Obama so much about that very point, about giving Iranians money when Obama unfroze Iranian assets. So... Trump really painted himself into this corner.
So Ali Hashim, I haven't read this one. I'll read it out with you guys. So Ali Hashim is one that reported yesterday. He's from Al Jazeera. I've had him on the show multiple times. So he's the one that was saying yesterday that the deal includes the US unfreezing American assets, pulling out from bases in the region, and Iran still charging a fee. So essentially, his claim yesterday that the deal is going to be complete capitulation for the US. So you got him, Ali Hashim, and others on one extreme, Western media on the other extreme. Well, he did this post a couple of hours ago. I haven't read it, so I'll read it here for the first time with you guys. Less than 24 hours after optimism emerged about possible Iran-US memorandum, negative vibes are already surfacing. A well-informed Iranian source tells me there are signs of US retreat on two central issues: the mechanism for unfreezing Iranian assets and the scope of a ceasefire in Lebanon. According to the source, the memorandum...
Yeah, because political reality is Trump couldn't agree to what he told the Iranians, and so he's backing out. And so this agreement is probably going to collapse.
Memorandum includes a Lebanon ceasefire framework, but Israel is reportedly uncomfortable with the arrangement and is pushing Washington to include language allowing it to carry out military operations in Lebanon under the justification of responding to, quote, any threat. Iran is rejecting that formulation and insisting on a sustainable and lasting ceasefire. Iran has informed all mediators, including Pakistan, that it will not sign the MOU unless all clauses are fully agreed and guaranteed. Pakistan reportedly suggested moving forward with agreed sections while postponing contentious points, but Iran rejected that approach. It's very interesting, insisting the disputed clauses are fundamental and non-negotiable.
Yeah, like Hezbollah opened the second front against Israel in support of Iran, and it'd be a betrayal for Iran not to insist on a ceasefire in Lebanon and let Israel annex part of Lebanon and build settlements there.
The overall picture suggests Iran increasingly views Washington as backing away from early understandings reached through mediators. Very interesting. So you've got Al Jazeera here saying that the main issue is the Lebanon matter. It's not the unfreezing of assets. And Iran is standing its ground that it wants a proper end to the war in Lebanon, not a ceasefire in name only, as we've seen it in the last couple of years. And then it only gets worse from here, guys. So we have Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu acknowledged that he's losing influence over Trump. I said that already. CNN says, quote, Iran will not get any money or sanctions relief up front. So it's kind of echoing the Western media.
By the way, the one reason Trump isn't criticizing Netanyahu so far in the war is because he can't. He's still pretending he's won the war. And he can't criticize Netanyahu for a war he won. If it ever gets to the point where he has to recognize the reality that the United States didn't win this war, then the gloves are off. He can go after Netanyahu. He can attack Netanyahu because everyone will believe at that point that the war is lost.
Media narrative coming from CNN now. Then you've got senior administration official told CNN Scott Jennings that a final agreement between the US and Iran is not yet complete. But he said that negotiations are 95% done. And he says the following: the proposed framework is set to involve two stages. First, reopening the Strait of Hormuz to restore global commercial shipping. So that's an official talking to Scott Jennings from CNN. While Iran agrees in principle to surrender enriched uranium. And second, transferring the nuclear material before sanctions relief is granted. The US position remains that Iran will not receive sanctions relief or financial benefits in advance. The senior administration official said the long-term American objective remains preventing Iran from blah, 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 blah. Conclusion from this point is echoing what other sources have said. The US wants Iran... The fee is not mentioned here. So it's very important that the fee, that the Strait of Hormuz is not being mentioned. I think that, if I want to read this correctly...
And reparations aren't being mentioned. The fee, from Iran's perspective, is the reparations. And I've always said that Iran's demand for reparations that have been in their list of demand would be the first demand to be thrown out. But they'd insist on collecting the fee on the Strait of Hormuz and would use that as their money for rebuilding. And so I don't think that they're going to give in on that. They will be charging a fee in the Strait of Hormuz. So Gulf nations, you should get busy on building pipelines around the Strait of Hormuz so you don't have to pay the fee.
The US has agreed that Iran will charge a fee. I think, and that's me guessing, I haven't heard anyone say this, but I really wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of agreement, with the beginnings of a discussion of an agreement with other Gulf countries to share the...
Yeah, as you're saying, Plato's cave, I'm telling you. Yes, we're seeing the shadows. We're not definitely don't know what's really going on. We're just seeing shadow of what's going on. And we're trying to make sense of it from that shadow.
Proceeds from that fee. So I think the main sticking point, guys, is Trump wants more concessions from Iran on their nuclear program and enriched uranium because that gives them a diplomatic win back home. Mainly, that's the main reason, because this is an MOU. There's nothing significant in this. This is more for optics when it comes to the nuclear program. Iran should give him this because it's just for...
You're wrong, Mario. If Iran gives him this, if Trump actually walks away from this with a victory, then it will be just like the 12-day war last year. He will think, I can just attack Iran, and so it might be hard, but I'll get a victory out of it eventually. And then next year, he'll bomb Iran again after the midterms. So, Mario, if Iran doesn't want Trump to bomb them again after the midterms, you know what? They don't give him this win.
Optics, it doesn't change anything, just to kind of get something on paper. And the big other sticking point is Iran wants the assets unfrozen now because they don't.
And Mario does live in Dubai, so I think he has a small bias, not a big bias, but a small bias in favor of, yeah, Iran should do this, because if he doesn't, the entire Middle East, including where I live, might go up in flames. So, yeah, he definitely thinks Iran should do something for that reason.
Don't trust the Americans will do it later, and the US does not. Because Trump keeps criticizing how Obama sent billions of dollars to Iran, and now he's doing the same thing at a bigger scale. He even posted today, which is stupid, he's shooting himself in the foot. He posted today criticizing Obama's deal, even though he's, based on what we're seeing, he's doing a very similar freaking deal. So I think these are the two main sticking points. I'm in the belief, and I've said this already in the show with Larry and before, is that I think the issue of Lebanon will be resolved faster than the others. As I said during the last ceasefire, and that's not according to any sources. I haven't had time to speak to anyone with all the interviews today, but that's just my understanding how I'm seeing things unfold and comparing it to what I saw in the last ceasefire. If you remember, guys, I take credit, we were by far the first people to report the ceasefire when it first happened, 50 minutes before anyone else. So
I actually said yes. I think Trump will get ceasefire in Lebanon too. That Netanyahu would have to give him that much breathing room. It would. If Trump desperately wants some type of negotiations and he needs a ceasefire in Lebanon to do that, and Netanyahu would have to give in.
We had some good information from people that are leading the negotiations, and based on these discussions, I knew that.
But in that scenario, Netanyahu is giving in for a ceasefire in Lebanon on the belief that negotiations between the United States and Iran will fail, and then he'll be able to resume the war in Lebanon. And he had every reason to believe that, because the two positions are so far apart, the U.S. and Iran. And in order for there to be any type of deal, the United States would basically have to surrender to Iran. Now that it actually looks like that might happen and the United States might surrender to Iran, then Netanyahu has less incentive to go along with the ceasefire, and because this is not the outcome he wants. It would be a disaster for him.
I came to the conclusion, I'll say I knew, that Trump was calling the shots when it came to Netanyahu. Netanyahu's position is weaker after this war than before. And I'm still in that belief, unless things have changed, unless donors have changed. I don't know anything about the donors. And based on that, I think the issue with Lebanon will be resolved. And then the last bits of information.
I think it'd be political suicide for Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire in Lebanon. I mean, one thing Israel has been hit hard by Iran when the missiles were flying. And the one upside from all that is that, we can annex all this region in Lebanon, make Israel bigger, get closer to the idea of Greater Israel. To agree to a ceasefire and withdraw from Lebanon would be a massive blow to Netanyahu politically.
Came in, more negative news. Another report from CNN saying that there's going to be no unfreezing of assets without some concessions on the nuclear program, which Iran has drawn a red line on. Okay, and Tasnim News just put out a report. When was that? 3 hours or 3.5 hours ago. An informed source also told Tasnim that Iran holds no optimism towards the US, conducting all exchanges through the Pakistani mediators. Yeah, they're saying Iran does not trust the US. They want to go through Pakistan. And even if a deal is signed, they still don't trust the US because the US has broken so many deals. And
makes sense. The United States has betrayed Iran so many times, and Trump specifically.
The last piece of information, guys, Tasnim has pushed back against the I-24, the Israeli news outlet. Their report claiming America's officials said Iran would not receive sanctions relief until it begins transferring its enriched uranium. So what's happening, guys, is Iran's talked about this before. A deal is reached between Iran and the US. And by the way, the Iranians are very slow. A report came in from CBS about this today. Iran's very slow in responding to deals because the supreme leader has to okay things, and it takes a long time for the information to get to him. Has to go through couriers. It goes from one courier to another until he gets the information. And that's been the case for a while. Because of that, which is, by the way, this is just wild that this is the case. There's two countries negotiating, and one country has a leader in hiding because he's worried about getting assassinated in the midst of a ceasefire and peace negotiations.
Israel would definitely target him if they knew where he was.
Shows you how crazy the situation is. But there's a slow process from the Iranians to respond. And what's going on is that every time there's a deal reached, it seems that Trump goes, he wants to sign a deal, then all these different people with influence are kind of pushing him one way or another, pulling him in different directions, and that's kind of delaying the process. My conclusion from all this, and I'll if I have more information on this, guys, I'll post it on my Twitter account. But from all these discussions, the information I've had from yesterday, a deal will be reached. I'm still in the same position I've had for a while. I've infamously been saying the war's over since the ceasefire, that the war's going to.
Yeah, and you've been wrong for what, like 2 months now?
Be ending 2 weeks before the ceasefire. I've been the optimistic one. I still am. And the reason is not because I'm...
Then why is the title of the stream, Trump's new Iran deal likely to fail? Clickbait?
I'm an optimist. It's because I just think that the US cannot afford this war diplomatically, politically.
Yes, but Trump can't afford to surrender either politically at home. The support he still has in his record low polling numbers is from supporters who believe we've won the Iran war. If he capitulates to Iran, that support plummets, and the people that dislike him currently for having started this war aren't going to come around. I mean, he's going to have the worst polling of any president ever if he does this. And I don't think he recovers from that politically. So he's trapped.
So politically, financially, diplomatically with allies as well. So when I say financially, I mean economically for the US and the world.
I think in order to accept the deal that Iran is willing to make, there's going to need to be pressure on him from other countries to do that. And we haven't reached the point where other countries are willing to band together to pressure the United States.
And most importantly, the American military is in a very, very, very bad position. To delay weapons shipments to Taiwan and Japan and Europe says a lot. So the US cannot afford this, and we're not even talking about the country's national debt. So that's why I've been saying the war is over for so long. And from people that I speak to that are closer to Trump than I am,
we did the insane action of attacking the supreme leader to begin with. So just because it's insane doesn't mean Trump won't do it.
Everyone is saying that Trump wants to walk the F away from this war. The only question is,
he can't politically. That's the problem.
Does he have enough influence, does enough power to be able to make his own decisions rather than make decisions at the behest of others? I'm in the belief in yes, there is a lot of influence over him, just not enough to drag him back into this war. But look, I've been, in some cases, I've questioned my own beliefs. I've been 50-50 a couple of stages where I thought we could be on the brink of war. And we are, just to be clear, I still believe we could get back into war. I'm not saying 100% the war is over. I'd be leaning at it.
I'm the opposite of him. I think there's a small chance that the deal is reached, that Trump bites the bullet and makes basically surrenders to Iran. A small chance of that. The bigger chance is that status quo continues, and it's more Trump. The moment he signs this deal with Iran, the political damage of surrendering to Iran hits him, and is pulling tanks. If he continues status quo of claiming that we won in Iran and just pretends to be negotiating, although they already have a deal that he doesn't want to take, at least then his polling will be higher for a while until gas prices go up in the summer. But all the scenarios are bad for him. But does he? And if he escalates again, Middle East goes up in flames, and he's finished politically too eventually. No good options for Trump.
Like now, it'd be like 80 to 90%, but that gives it 20 to 20% likelihood the war could return. And that will be a different discussion of how that war would look like.
Oh, the war returning, I actually think that's a small chance too. Like a small chance of a deal, small chance of the war resuming, big chance, like 50% chance of just status quo continuing, languishing, where there's a deal, there's not a deal, they're negotiating, not negotiating, Trump making threats and not following through with the threats, and just like we'll hear at middle of next week, well, Trump has decided to do nothing and just wait for his blockade to pressure Iran into a deal that he's willing to accept, and then everything goes back to the waiting game. And then the economic pain hits over the summer. Countries band together, put pressure on Trump, and he's forced to take the bad deal from Iran in 2-3 months. That's my most likely scenario right now. There's still 25% chance Trump actually bites the bullet, does this bad deal. 25% chance we escalate and all hell breaks loose. That's my current feelings about the Middle East. Anywho, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch, and I'll see you next video. Bye.